When I was a young boy, he would explain to me the difference between someone who was successful on the left side versus the right side. Yet, being young, I really did not pay much more attention to what he said. I did not understand the difference between an employee mindset and a business owner mindset. I was just trying to serve in a school. Yet I did hear his words, and soon his words begins to make sense. Having two dynamic and successful father figures around me gave meaning to what each was saying, but it was what they were doing that allowed me to begin to notice the difference between the employee self-employed side of the quadrant and the business investment side. At first, the differences were subtle and then they became glaring. For example, one painful lesson I experienced as a young boy was simply how much time one dad had available to spend with me versus the doctor as and the success and the prominence of both that grew. It was obvious that one dad had and less time to spend with his wife and four children. My real dad was always on the road at meeting or dashing off to the airport for more meeting. The more successful he got, the fewer dinners he had together as a family. Weekends he spent at home in his crowded little office buried under paperwork. My rich dad, on the other hand, had more and more free time as his success grew. One of the reasons I learned so much about money, finance, business, and life was simply because my rich dad had more free time for his children and me. Another example is that both dads made more and more money as they become successful. But my real dad, the educated one, also got further into debt, so he worked harder and suddenly find himself in a higher income tax bracket. His banker and accountant would then tell him to buy a bigger house for the so-called tax break. My dad would follow the advice and buy a bigger house, and soon he was working harder than ever so he could make more money to pay for the new house, taking him even further away from his family. My rich dad was different. He made more and more money but paid less in taxes. He too had bankers and accountants, but he was not getting the same advice my highly educated dad was getting. The main reason, yet the driving force that would not allow me to stay on the left side of the quadrant was what happened to my highly educated but poor dad at the peak of his career. In the early 1970s, I was already out of the college and in Pensacola, Florida, going through pilot training for the Marine Corps on my way to Vietnam. My educated dad was now the superintendent of education for the state of Hawaii and a member of the governor's staff. One evening, my dad phoned me in my room on base. Son, he said, I'm going to resign from my job and run for lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii for the Republican Party. I gulped and then said, you're going to run the office against your boss? That's right, he replied. Why, I asked. Republicans do not have a chance in Hawaii. The Democratic Party and the labor unions are too strong. I know, son. I also know that we do not have a prayer of winning. Judge Samuel King will be the candidate for governor, and I will be his running mate. Why, I ask again, why run against your boss if you knew you're going to lose? Because my conscience won't let me do anything else. The game these politicians are playing disturb me. Are you saying they are corrupt? I ask. I don't want to say that said my real dad. He was an honest and moral man who really spoke badly about anyone. He was always a diplomat, yet I could tell from his voice that he was angry and upset. When he said, I'll just say that my conscience bothers me when I see what was going on behind my scene. I could not live with myself if I turned a blind eye and did nothing. My job and paychecks are not as important to my conscience. After a long silence, I realized that my dad's mind was made up. Good luck, I said quietly. I'm proud of you for your courage and I'm proud to be your son. My dad and the replicant ticket was crushed as expected. The re-elected governor sent the word out that my dad was never to get a job again with the government for the state of Hawaii. And he never did. At the age of 54, my dad went looking for a job and I was on the way to Vietnam. At middle age, my dad was looking for a new job. He went from job with big titles and low pay to more jobs with big titles and low pay. Jobs were He was the executive director of XYZ Service, a non-profit organization, and managing director of ABC Service, another non-profit. He was a tall, brilliant, and dynamic man who was no longer welcome in the only world he knew. The world of government employee. He tried starting several small business. He was a consultant for a while and even bought a famous franchise, but they all failed. As he grew older and his strength slipped away, so did he was drive to start over again. His lack of will became even more pronounced after each business failure. He was a successful employee trying to serve as an self-employed, a quadrant in which he had no training experience and for which he had no heart. He loved the world of public education, but he could not find a way to get back in. The ban on his employment in the state government was slightly in place. In some circles, the word is called blacklisted. If not for Social Security and Medicare, the last years of his life would have been a complete disaster. He died frustrated and a little angry, yet he died with a clear conscience. So what kept me going in the darkest of hours? It was the haunting memory of my educated dad sitting at home, waiting for the phone to ring, trying to succeed in the world of business, a world he knew nothing about. That and the joyous memory of seeing rich dad growing happier and more successful as his years went on inspired me. Instead of declining at age 54, rich dad blossomed. He had become rich years before that, but now he was becoming mega rich. He was constantly in the newspaper as a man who was buying up Wiki and Muay. His years of methodically building business and investment was paying off and he was on his way to becoming one of the richest men in the Iceland. Small differences becomes large differences. Because my rich dad had explained the quadrant to me, I was better able to see the small difference that grew into large difference when measured over the years a person spent working. Because of the quadrant, I knew it was better to decide not so much what I wanted to do, but more who I wanted to become as my working years progressed. In the darkest hours, it was this deep knowledge and lesson from two powerful dads that kept me going. It is more than the quadrant. The cash flow quadrant is more than two lines and some letters. If you look below the surface of this simple diagram, you will find completely different worlds as well as different ways of looking at the world. As a person who who has looked at the world from both the left side of the quadrant and the right side of the right side, I can honestly say the world look much different depending on which side you are on, and those differences are what this book is about.